Oi!
Since the events of Episode 1 has occurred, the small animals of Gondwa have proven themselves rather dissatisfied and intimidated by the presence of a mighty beast. However, these small creatures are not the only animals dissatisfied with the new neighbor. This young adult Daspletosaurus has proven itself to be anxious, even though his species can grow up to 30 feet from snout to tail and weigh up to 4 tons. In the real world, Daspletosaurus would not have to worry about a Tyrannotitan commandeering its territory. This is mostly because Tyrannotitan and Daspletosaurus were on opposite ends of the New World. What I mean by that is, Tyrannotitan was found in Argentina of South America, and Daspletosaurus was found as far north as Alberta. The most southern Daspletosaurus would have been was Montana, where the only threat to a Daspletosaurus is an herbivorous combat veteran and a Daspletosaurus that is far meaner than the individual Daspletosaurus in question. And this individual's name is known as Ares, in reference to the Greek god of war. The main reasoning for his naming of Ares is because the Daspletosaurus's life, much like its more famous cousin, the Tyrannosaurus rex, is never without conflict. Yet despite this, a Daspletosaurus never usually seeks conflict in the first place, unless it is desperately hungry. Thankfully, however, he is not desperately hungry, just bored, snackish, and, evidently through the footage, thirsty. With a decent sense of hearing, Ares has found what could possibly help him with his anxiety and his snackishness: a Silosaurus. In the real world, Daspletosaurus and Silosaurus wouldn't have been in the same ecosystem, for Silosaurus lived in Poland during the Triassic period, while Daspletosaurus lived in Canada and the United States during the Cretaceous period, relatively a lot later than the dinosauriform Silosaurus. However, in the artificial ecosystem of Gondwa, Daspletosaurus, in this ecosystem specifically, can and will hunt anything that is in the same ecosystem as it, and yet it still has to worry about the other apex predators. And on that note, it is fairly safe to assume that due to the fact that in Gondwa, Ares has to worry about larger, nastier predators, like the protagonist from Episode 1 in Thriving with Titans, it is relatively safe to assume that he is rather anxious about the neighbor, even though the ecological change has benefited a lot of carnivores. For the alphas of the small creatures tend to provide a lot of food, but the thing he is concerned about is how long will it take before food becomes scarce, and both parties have to fight each other. The young male has an inexperience of dealing with larger foes, but thankfully he has a means of distracting himself from the stress of dealing with another apex predator. In the real world, there is a decent chance that both Daspletosaurus and Didolphodon have coexisted, or both creatures have been found in both the Horseshoe Canyon Formation and the Old Man Formation in Alberta, Canada, from 70 million years ago all the way up to 79 million years ago during the Cretaceous period of the Mesozoic era. Yet, it is also possible that both Didolphodon and Daspletosaurus have never met, since Didolphodon has only made it up to 66 million years ago, the time when the meteor struck Earth and wiped out every non-avian dinosaur on the planet. But on this artificial ecosystem of Gondwa, Daspletosaurus and Didolphodon do coexist regardless of the environment. And on the note regarding the Daspletosaurus in this video, Ares has made his mind. This patrol of the grassland will be his last before he has to move to a different territory. While food and resources are plenty, it's only a matter of when resources get low and competition for resources gets high, an environmental stress factor that affects everything no matter what species it is, be it on Gondwa or the world. And Ares, despite being a very combative creature, has made the decision to simply retreat. He does not know how dangerous the apex could get, but he knows enough that Tyrannotitan on Gondwa are built to take on bigger game than he is. Benefit of leaving this territory is that he would not keep hearing the shrill distress call of the Pamelaria. Or if he had a Didolphodon Joey for every time these early Triassic archosaurs from India have ruined his hunts, he would be in a food coma by now. Thankfully, however, this did not hinder Ares from getting a snack before he hits the road. This road in question is appearing to be uncertain though. Even when the fog has disappeared, he is still uncertain. Uncertain of so many factors, such as, will this neighbor be the reason he dies? Or will it be the journey that kills him? Will he die before he even makes it to his new territory? Will he even be able to obtain a new territory? Will he live long enough to see tomorrow? Will he ever have the chance to start a new generation of brutal killers? Will he even get the chance to see the new years? Or will he be nothing more than a banquet for lucky scavengers? The only way to find out is to keep moving forward and ready yourself for any challenge that comes along the way. This is a mindset that even for him can sometimes be easier said than done, especially given the unpredictable nature of the future. After charging through the unknown, Ares has come out to the other side, undetected, alive, and well, and he now is entering his new color scheme. A color scheme that indicates that he is now a fully fledged adult. Many a young Daspletosaurus can only dream of such an achievement, especially since survival is a profession where many will die young. But now, Ares has a different problem. His new problem is that he must find a new territory to conquer. Unfortunately, it does not help when he is not the apex predator in this artificial ecosystem. Thankfully, the night has brought forth its blessing. Ares can simply pass by the sleeping apexes without provoking any attack. However, it does not mean that he has no reason to be careful. He still has to be careful around the sleeping apexes when embarking on his journey throughout the night. As the dusk settles, many of the inhabitants of Gondwa commit to sleeping, some of which, however, are still awake, or are waking up. And Ares, meanwhile, is still in search of a new territory. The ghost of this artificial ecosystem would prove itself way too dangerous for him. While there's plenty of food sources for this creature, there's simply not the kind of water he would want to drink. The salinity in marine water would dehydrate him to death, not to mention the hungry monsters that would try to sneak up on him and surprise him from below the waves. There is also the harsh wind of the coast, blowing small amounts of debris in his eyes. It's why he finds shelter behind the rocks and stops for a bit, mostly to take a brief moment and a breather from the flying debris that hits his eyes. Shedding his young adult scales has made his skin very itchy, but thankfully both problems can be solved by simply scratching against the rocky surface of the cliffs. After a good scratch, Ares finds reason in simply disappearing into the forest, in order to avoid getting attacked by the apex of the skies around Gondwa. And even then, the apex of the skies will not risk getting injured from the likes of Ares. A brief moment to look back at his old territory, Ares decides that he must keep going through with his current decision, no matter how dangerous the journey could get. The soft bellows of the small Mongolian ceratopsian, Bagaceratops, somewhat calms his nerves down, but at the same time, he still feels at unease, especially since an alpha could be nearby. But the thing he knows is nearby from being downwind is a smaller Tyrannosaurid of some kind. Yet, Ares has no quarrels trying to commandeer his territory, especially since he knows there's possibly better pastures than this. Despite being presented with a potentially delicious meal, Ares does not bother trying to hunt the small Mongolian ceratopsian, especially since he needs to be on the move and make the most out of the apex's sleep schedule. Evidently, both nature and fate have decided to smile upon Ares at the expense of this venomous reptile, Paleocyniwa. In the real world, Daspletosaurus and Paleocyniwa have in fact been found in the same formations, such as the Dinosaur Park Formation in Alberta, Canada, and the Old Man Formation, also in Alberta, Canada. Both of them have equal amounts of likelihood of coexisting as the Didelphodon from earlier in the video. But whereas in the real world, where I am very uncertain about Daspletosaurus, Didelphodon, and Paleocyniwa coexisting in the same ecosystem, here on Gondwa, all three are guaranteed to coexist with one another. As the nighttime settles, Ares takes a quick moment to hydrate, and after that, he is ready to embark on the next part in his journey throughout the night. Despite the relative safety that nighttime brings, there are still plenty of dangers that come around at night. Dangerous predators will skulk from anywhere, be it at the trees, around the rocks, or even hiding in plain sight. Thankfully for Ares, he is one of the dangers that lurks at night. It especially helps since Daspletosaurs, like Ares, are built to hunt large prey and go toe-to-toe with even scary ceratopsians like Styracosaurus or Albertoceratops. But Daspletosaurus's nose picks up the scent of an animal that is relatively less risky but is also very, very filling. An Alpha Paleosaniwa. He'll have to take advantage of his new color scheme if he is to get food with minimal risk. A successful hunt, but it could have gone better. Well, he's won the fight outside. There is a fight within his body, for the reptile's venom has entered his bloodstream. The only thing he can do now is simply sleep it off and wait for the venom to pass over. Whilst it is justified for you, my dear viewer, to have skepticism regarding a dinosaur's immunity, there is some decent evidence of a dinosaur's immune system thanks to Daspletosaurus's relative, the T-Rex. Specifically, the Stan specimen, which in case you do not know, Stan had some puncture holes in his skull that were showcasing to heal up cleanly. This would suggest that Tyrannosaurids, most if not all of them, may have had a strong immune system to diseases, and it is possible that it may be venom resistant. But we do not know that to the extent until we find fossilized evidence, and even then, the likelihood of that is very low. The only good part about that likelihood is that it is not zero. Anyway, after picking up the corpse of the Alpha Paleosaniwa, as well as very briefly being spooked by another Alpha Paleosaniwa, Ares bolts it, and continues to do so until he is a safe enough distance from one of the Alpha Paleosaniwas, all while carrying another venomous reptile in his mouth. After taking a moment to look back, Ares has decided that he is way in too deep to go back, especially since there are still threats in his old territory that he would rather not deal with. While it may seem strange for a Daspletosaurus to simply kill a lizard whilst on a full stomach, and then proceed to carry around its corpse for no apparent reason, there is in fact a justified reason as to why he did that. And that is because he doesn't know when or if he'll get breakfast tomorrow morning. Especially when he has a new territory to look for. So for the time being, he will carry this lizard's corpse, for until he is certain that he's hungry. On the topic of finding new territory, his nose picks up the scent of an armored tank. This is something that he is not willing to risk his life over, and so he'll have to move on in order to survive, even if it means crossing a river that could be infested with dangerous animals from below the water's surface. Upon seeing a path that is very clear, Ares chooses to take this path, especially since it's a lot easier than trying to weave through dense foliage. In real life, this is an option that a surprising amount of animals would choose over maneuvering through dense foliage. While this territory may have a lot of clear points, as well as plenty of areas where he could set up an ambush, on paper, this does seem to be the kind of place he would want to hunt in. However, his nose picks up the scent of a dangerous creature of some sort. A creature he would rather not face alone. Closer Ares gets to the gorge and the dark woods, the stronger the scent of this dangerous creature gets. His nose tells him that this is a very dangerous herbivore, one that he cannot take without a pack of his kind. Ares will have to tread carefully if he is to survive, lest he wakes up the dangerous herbivore and ends up joining his pack in the realm of eternal solace. For sneaking past the dangerous herbivore, Ares has finally made it to safety. But safety can only last for so long, as he still has yet to find his new territory. Bear in mind though, dear viewer, the Tyrannotitan and the dangerous herbivore wouldn't have been that much of a problem had his pack not eaten each other to death. For context, dear viewer, a year before Episode Zero's release, Ares' pack was suffering from a food shortage. Eventually, they had to resort to fighting riskier herbivores. Pack members that got severely injured ultimately were sacrifices for food. Unfortunately though, some of those Daspletosaurs from his pack were also accidentally killed and then eaten during feeding time. An unfortunate canon event that still haunts him to this day, but he still finds himself lucky that he has made it this far, despite being the underdog of the pack. The only reason why he's not dead yet is because he made it out of this food shortage, surviving only by his wits. While it may seem cruel and merciless to simply eat your own kind during a food shortage or a different type of crisis, it's the wild. The concept of mercy or morality does not exist. That is the only W human society gets, but only most of it. Unfortunately for Ares, he does not live amongst human society. He only lives amongst an order where both brain and brawn are a biological privilege to have. And Ares, while he has the brute power to kill most alpha creatures, he also has the brain to understand what to do when around a saltwater river, specifically one with a sheer drop like this one. His wits, paired with his instincts, tell Ares that there's a slightly safer option than just trying to run over the cliff and risk dying. While it may take longer for him to simply get from point A to point B, it's definitely worth the walk. As he gets closer to the crossing point, he can see that there is some solid ground for him to get his feet on. There is a decent possibility that he's probably not going to make this cross, especially since he doesn't have any form of other Daspletosaurs to act as cannon fodder. But it's not going to stop him from crossing, especially since he still has a new territory to look for. His nose picks up the scent of a Paleosaniwa, but thankfully, it's not an alpha Paleosaniwa like the last time, which means he wouldn't have to worry about being attacked by the lizard as he makes his way across the mouth of the river. With determination, Ares has finally made it across the mouth of the river. Now he has to move as quickly as possible, as a means of trying to make sure he doesn't get detected by a different predator. While both of which are in the same size caliber, the difference between him and the predator in question is that this different predator has the mentality of "quack it, we ball." However, Ares is now tired after a long journey and must rest for the night. So the second best thing he could do is rest downwind and hope the creature does not wake up. In the morning, Ares finally awakens, satisfied that he is not dealing with any dangerous beasts, as of now. But his journey is not over, especially since he is still in another carnivore's territory, specifically another apex predator's territory. Ares, upon further curiosity, decides that he is not really going to risk it, especially since he doesn't know whether or not they are normal small creatures or alphas of said small creatures. And thus, his sidetrack is done with. He has to get back to his quest, to find a new territory. His current instinct is telling him to go further upland. The drawback to this, though, is the risk of encountering the other apex predator. Thankfully, Ares is way too smart to try and fight when it's not necessary. Thankfully, he has made it. But now, he must continue on his journey. Hopefully, he doesn't have to deal with any more apex predators. Ares' journey has been long, arduous, tiresome. He's been traveling for a day and a half and an entire night. He has endured the battle of the elements. He has crossed many a treacherous river which could have harbored a dangerous amphibian or crocodile. And he has even managed to sleep in an area where a dangerous predator would lurk. By all those standards, he could have died relatively easy. But, evidently, fate has decided to smile upon him. And now, it is likely that the worst could be behind him, or maybe the worst could be ahead of him. What is not a maybe, however, is the fact that Ares is about ready to eat the lizard that he has just killed last night, along with the fact that he could also use some water, especially since he's about thirsty. Another noisy Pamelaria. Oh well, at least it is a safe thing to assume that here is not that dangerous. While Ares could put the head of the annoying reptile in his mouth, he already has a very annoying reptile already in his mouth, and he has been carrying it around ever since the time he killed the Alpha Paleosaniwa. But it is safe to assume that now is a good time to eat the lizard. With breakfast out the way, it is very safe to assume that now is a time for a good drink of water. And thankfully for Ares, there is a large watering hole nearby. But even more thankfully, his nose picks up the scent of a dinosaur that is smaller than him. Thus, this increases the chances of him commandeering the territory with little to no conflict. The sound of pine wood popping and branches snapping has gotten Ares very riled up. Thankfully, though, nothing is following him. It is just the wind. Despite this, however, Ares still needs to keep a sharp eye out, lest he becomes prey for an Alpha Goniopholis, if it's even in this lake. One of his packmates was slain and eaten by an Alpha Goniopholis, after all. Thankfully, there is no Alpha Goniopholis out to stalk him this time, And so, Ares continues on his way. But his nose picks up more of the scent of the specific dinosaur he could encounter on his quest. As he gets closer to the territory, Ares can get the whiff of the following factors about this different animal, such as various factors. Factor Alpha. This animal is in fact an old bull, with experience in combat. He'll have to be wary about that one. Factor Bravo. This different animal has a habit of bullying the apex of the region he just crossed through in order to get to the lake, with relative success. The final factor in question is the fact that this different animal, despite being an old male, is plenty healthy, especially with how well fed he is. As he goes beyond the lake, Ares' nose picks up more of the different animal, along with the scent of animals that this creature in question tends to hunt. Assuming the different animal in question is in the territory, he could definitely beat the other animal if he plays his cards right. The reason as to why he has insight about the other animal is thanks to the fact that Tyrannosaurids like Ares, the Daspletosaurus, have a very sharp sense of smell, sight, and hearing. It's mostly thanks to the nasal cavity located right behind the nostrils, specifically between the eyes and the nostrils. This massive nasal cavity allows Tyrannosaurids to sniff out even the smallest hint of scent particle from miles away. Because of this, it is very safe to assume that a Daspletosaurus can get some knowledge about a different animal, depending on what it could be. Dogs of modern day are very capable of getting the intel of the different animal and tracking it down, but in the case of the Daspletosaurus known as Ares, he is simply just trying to commandeer a different territory. And on that topic, it is very safe to assume that there are plenty of places of this new territory to set up an ambush, which is something a Daspletosaurus usually tends to rely on when hunting larger game. As the other scent of the animal gets stronger, it is safe to assume that the Daspletosaurus has come across a naturally crafted labyrinth. This labyrinth in question has a lot of places that are built for an ambush, along with the fact that there are plenty of areas where Ares could take advantage of his color scheme. This is the ideal jackpot for an ambush predator like Ares. But one question remains. How much food is in this labyrinth? Given the amount of noises that a lot of the animals are making when in the presence of Ares, it is very safe to assume that there is a decent amount of food in this labyrinth. All that Ares has to do is simply look for the food. The added bonus to the new territory is the fact that there is a nice ocean view, not to mention some beachfront. It could come in pretty handy whenever he's in the mood for seafood, which is in fact something that some animals have a habit of indulging in, especially the carnivores. Another successful hunt. And now he has brunch. While a storm might be enough to interrupt brunch for us humans, it doesn't really interrupt the brunch for a dinosaur like Ares. He'll continue to finish his brunch until his stomach is full, and then after that, he will find shelter wherever he can. His instincts are telling him that a cave is nearby. He will simply use this cave as a means of ensuring that he has shelter from the elements, especially since a storm can be dangerous for even the mightiest of dinosaurs. But his nose detects that the other dinosaur frequents this cave very often. He'll have to take a look around in order to make sure that the other dinosaur is not nearby. The animal in question, however, seems to be absent from its territory, and thus, Ares will consider to simply stick around for the time being. If the animal ever comes back, there can either be mutualism between two different species, or, the more likely case, would be conflict. Either way is bound to work. But for now, Ares will simply sleep in this rather less roomy cave than he prefers, especially since he has been on a very, very long journey and is in need of sleep, especially after having a nice meal. Because of that, he will simply sleep beyond his regular sleep schedule. Then he'll have to get back to the normal sleep schedule of a Daspletosaurus. And because of that, it is very safe to assume that either Ares will clash with another dinosaur over territory, or he has simply found a new home. Even with the storms passing, Ares will still sleep, even when the other dinosaur in question wakes him up and attempts to remove him from the territory. But thankfully, his nose tells him that this dinosaur in question puts up a fight that is either a fair one, or a fight that he could take down because he's a Daspletosaurus, also known as the Freightful Lizard. Join me in the next adventure as we follow the old bull that Ares has picked up the scent of. And in the next episode, we will follow the old bull as he goes on a journey ever since Ares has commandeered his territory. But until then, forget not your humanity. Happy holidays. And remember, you will become immune to the cheese touch if you subscribe to the cheese touch.